Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor. If you have a mom, you'll love our podcasts.
This will be so anticlimactic again. Put this part, when I said it will be anticlimactic, put this part in whoever edits it.
And Carmela starting off the show with a little negativity. I'll tell you why it's going to be anticlimactic today. And it's because we live in a generation now, and I'm going to scold everyone from 82 in front of me on down. We have today on the show a living, breathing, walking piece of history. And he's 102 years old. He was the lead prosecutor at the Nuremberg Trials, which is where they brought to justice Nazi war criminals. He's 102. So he's not speaking in little sound bites, and he's not whizzing through things like we do on TikTok and Instagram. But if you're listening to this podcast and you turn it off because you got no attention span like a fly because of Mark Zuckerberg and these other morons in the world, I admonish you. You better listen to this podcast out of all our podcasts. But before we get to the main schmooze with Ben Ferencz, who we already spoke to, which is why I can tell you that he did not speak in sound bites, I want to tell you about myself for a moment.
Oh, God, don't do that. I'm going to go out.
I was so stressed last night. I'll tell you why. Carmela, had you ever heard of a Capuchin monkey?
You know what? This is so stupid. It just shows your IQ gap
so
with
last
him.
night...
No, don't do this. Do not do this.
I'm telling them what I had.
You know what, Joel? You and I have to sit down and put down the perimeters of what is acceptable to me.
Carmela's got a lot of issues the last couple of days, but I had to cover two monkeys named Gilligan and Bert who are strapped onto the backs of two dogs, and they ride them dressed in jockey outfits around a track.
Aren't you embarrassed after who? What? Ask the editor to cut it out. We should stop with this today.
The reason I bring it up is these animal rights activists are as hard-nosed as prosecutors, and they were texting me last night, and it gave me a headache because I was like, I'm going to get yelled at by the station because at the end of my story, I spoke truth to power. The animal rights activist said that these monkeys are mistreated, and the owner of the monkeys said that they eat at the dining room table. And I put that in my tag, which is the end of the story. And I said, you know what? I shouldn't have said that because the animal rights activists are going to scream at me because I said the monkeys eat at the dining room table. And you know what? I didn't hear a word from anyone.
You want to know, very honestly,
we're going to be right back with...
This shows an inferior intelligence that after a man like this, you had to use this story. You do me a favor, cover your tracks and don't tell this story.
We're going to be right back on the main schmooze with Ben Ferencz, Ferencz. Google him. Listen, if you tune it out because you're bored because he does not speak in sound bites, shame on you. Right back with a living legend.
Do you want to help my son? His company, Content Partners Media, specializes in brand video and content creation for innovative companies and others. Please go to www.contentpartnersmedia.com and hire him. I repeat, please go to www.contentpartnersmedia.com.
Welcome back to Surviving the Survivor. It's time now for the main schmooze.
Carm, of all the guests we've had, and I know you say this frequently, but I can unequivocally say that the guest today is the most interesting guest we've had, not just because of what he accomplished in his lifetime, but also where he is in his lifetime. He's been on this earth for more than a century. We are talking about Ben Ferencz, who is the last living prosecutor and the chief prosecutor from the Nuremberg Trials. Are you excited to speak with him?
I am very excited, and I am really looking forward to it.
Ben, can I call you Ben, or do I have to call you Mr. Ferencz?
Of course, Ben is fine.
Okay, let me tell the audience a little bit about you. It would probably take me about a decade to get through your bio, but I've done it in a shorter amount of time, and let me let them.
Would you like to have these shades pulled up a little bit so that you don't see me being sliced?
No, you look fantastic the way you are. The women will love you the way you look right now.
We'll stay where we are. We don't want to change that.
Yes. All right. So let me tell the audience. First of all, do you have a street named after you? I didn't think so, but Ben Ferencz does. Ben's dean at Harvard Law allowed him to finish school before he entered the Army as an infantryman. During his military career, he was awarded 5 battle stars, landing on Normandy Beach before helping liberate Nazi death camps. Post-war, he was referred by his mentor at Harvard Law, eventually becoming the chief prosecutor at the first of 13 Nuremberg Trials, where he went 22 for 22, that is 100% on convictions, including 13 death sentences for Nazi war criminals. But he wasn't done there. He went on to help create the International Criminal Court. He was just nominated for the Congressional Gold Medal. It is the highest civilian honor in America. It was won by some other people you may have heard of, like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Nelson Mandela, and Mother Teresa, who reminds me of my lovely mother. And did we mention Ben is 102 years old, and he still works. He's at his desk right now where he responds to 100 plus emails a day. I had the pleasure of meeting Ben on Monday night where I did a story on him for my other job, which is a journalist for a TV network. But Ben, when we did the interview together, I asked you a question at the end. I said, what is one question out of the bazillion interviews that you have done that no reporter has ever asked you that you wish they did ask you? And I think your response was, why do you do what you do? Is that right?
If you say it's right, I guess it's right.
So Ben, why do you and why did you do what you did?
I do what I do because I have no choice. I have no choice in the sense that I truly was traumatized by my wartime experiences, and particularly in the liberation of several Nazi concentration camps, which were still in action when I got there. And the crematorium was still going. The dead bodies were lying on the ground. You couldn't tell if they were dead or alive. People who had been humans crawling in the piles of garbage, looking for a piece of bread to still their starvation. That's a scene which I can never forget and have trouble talking about. And I asked myself, why am I doing all this? And I have no choice. I believe that I have found the answer to what we need to do. And I have to persuade more people in the country and in the world that the answer that I'm putting forward is the only sensible one. And I try to make it very simple. It's law, not war. In wartime, we kill millions of innocent people. If we turn to the rule of law, even if it's a bad decision, it will save those lives and enable the world to go forward in a more humane way that they do now. So with that as a goal, knowing that I cannot achieve it in my lifetime, I've made good progress. We have made good progress, but it will take perhaps several generations still to learn that law is better than war. And if they have any doubts, they will soon find out, because I am aware that most people are not, that the United States now has the power from cyberspace to cut off the electrical grid on planet Earth. And that would mean killing everybody on this planet. And I got that when it was still secret, at least 10 years ago, from an American Army general who was in charge of it at the Pentagon. And knowing that we possess even greater destructive weapons than now obsolete nuclear weapons, I feel I cannot stop trying to persuade the young people in particular that their lives are at stake. And it's not something I do for amusement or for medals. I mean, I'm grateful for the honors bestowed upon me by people who share my vision. But it's a live problem today. We spend billions of dollars today to kill more people instead of using the money to help the legitimate complaints of people who are desperate. So that's the world in which we live as I see it. I'm trying to change it. I'm grateful for your help and the help of others who share my vision. And I'm hopeful that it takes the courage not to be discouraged. And I hope we'll have the courage to continue. And I'm grateful for your help.
Ben, let's take a step back and sort of set the table. So you were born, it's interesting, you told me your sister was born in Hungary in the same bed, but you were born in Romania in the same bed. My mother is from Yugoslavia. By the way, my lovely mother to my left and your right is a survivor herself. And we can get into that story in a few minutes. But I want to hear, what was your childhood like? And I know you grew up in New York City. So tell us how you got to New York and what life in New York was like before your life in the Army began.
I can explain how it came about that my sister was born in another country, but in the same bed. They changed the borders. It was after the First World War. They split up Hungary and Romania and tried to have the different racial groups divided equally. But I learned then that it doesn't matter what you call the country. It matters how you treat the inhabitants. And both Hungary and Romania were anti-Semitic. And so my parents were well advised. As soon as they could raise enough money for a ticket, even if it was third class, the only reason they went third class was there was no fourth class. And we sailed past the Statue of Liberty and tried to settle in the United States.
Karmela, I think Karmela was chomping at the bit here with a question.
No, first I want to introduce myself, and it's beyond an honor. I don't know if there is a higher level than an honor, because I never in my wildest dreams thought that I would ever have the opportunity to talk to you directly. It's like, I mean, you achieved things in life and you went to heights that
that any Jewish mother would be proud of.
That any Jewish mother would be proud of. And, I think what is interesting speaking of your childhood, I was born in Yugoslavia. 2 years later, in the same town where I was born, it became Hungary. Then after World War II, it became Yugoslavia again, and it became Serbia. So on that one level, I beat you, because you were in 2 countries in the same place. I was in 3 countries in the same place.
Congratulations on being a survivor.
Yeah, that's what we are all trying to do.
So Ben, I don't want to spark any controversy here, and I want to be careful with how I say this, but Karmela, as you can imagine, dealt with a lot of horror. Her father was snatched away from her in Yugoslavia in front of her eyes, and they had to run out through a gate, and she was hidden in a all-boys school. Nunnery as a young girl. So she, I don't think, has quite the empathy that you have for other humans, and I want to get into what you said to Otto Ohlendorf in a little while. So I was talking to her, and I think it's difficult for her to grasp your humanity in a way, because Karmela.
By the way, I am here, so he doesn't have to speak for me. Okay, I can speak for myself.
Am I right about this?
I can speak for myself. I think that what I admire about you is that after you went through the Nuremberg period, okay, you devoted the rest of your life, you had faith in the law. And maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see any cynicism in you, any questioning, anything. You know, I am an optimist by personality, and I worked as a social worker. I have a master's in social work, okay? And I worked as a social worker with all sorts of people through the last 35, 40 years.
What Karmela is trying to say, I think, is she doesn't trust the law quite as much as you do.
Because I see the law being also corrupted. I see the law being corrupted a lot. But maybe what I think you are saying is that this is the best of all options. The law and the respect for the law is the best option. The other options are even worse, or they're worse compared to the law.
And you know that Ben is a very, very, very smart man. He's listening. He's listening right now. So Ben, what is your response to hearing this?
I think that he is very correct. It's an impossible dream. However, we are making progress, and that's the key. And I give you specific examples with which I was very closely involved. We have created a permanent international criminal court after the International Military Tribunal, which was set up by the Allied victorious powers, the British, the French, the Russians, and the Americans. The trial against Hermann Goering and company. That was the first big, known as the Nuremberg Trial. That trial just scraped the surface, and it was a small selection. And it was decided that the world was entitled to get a broader picture. How is it that doctors, lawyers, judges, businessmen, all were engaged in this effort to kill all the Jews as well as other people? And it was in those subsequent trials, as they were called, that I was the chief prosecutor. And I immediately ran into the problem which your mother has suggested. People say it'll never happen. Well, of course it'll never happen if you never try. But we have made significant progress in my lifetime, and I have been much involved in that progress. We had set up a dozen subsequent trials to explain what the International Military Tribunal was all about. And we have had a sampling of other defendants from these various categories of German life. So we have created a permanent international criminal court. There are other temporary international courts still struggling to prevent the crimes being committed, to deter the crimes. And that's all part of the reality of life. We can't undo in one human life what has been glorified for centuries. We have glorified killing your enemy in time of war, glorify warfare. Hooray for being in the army and all that. I appreciate the sympathy for the soldiers who fought in the war. I was given 5 battle stars for having survived every of the 5 major battles of World War II. But it has only increased my determination. There's got to be a better way for human beings to deal with their problems than to go and kill thousands of innocent people.
Ben, take us into you tell a very interesting story which kind of changed your whole perspective when you got to a death camp, and what did you witness in that death camp? And tell us a story about the revenge of putting a Nazi into the crematorium.
Well, my goal, after having served as a corporal or sergeant in infantry, I was assigned to set up the war crimes procedure The reason I was selected by that was because one of my Harvard professors, Sheldon Gluck, had written a book on war crimes, and he had hired me as a student at the time, a student who was there on a scholarship, and I had no money. I read everything that is written on the subject and gave him brief summaries, which he incorporated in his book on war crimes. And he had been in touch with the Pentagon. They were consulting with him before they created these courts. And he said, go find Benny out there. He's there. He knows all about this. And they took me out of the anti-aircraft artillery where I was assigned and transferred me to headquarters of General Patton, who was the lead.
So you enter this death camp and you see, what do you see before you?
The death camps, I entered into a number of them. As fast as the Germans retreated, we moved behind them. And the scene was pretty much the same everywhere. Crematoria going. In one of the camps, the inmates, and some of them were still in good shape, particularly Russian prisoners of war, were chomping at the bit. But the inmates grabbed one of the guards and they beat him. I was already in the camp. Americans had taken over more or less. The SS was still fleeing from the camp. And they caught him and they beat him. And then they put him on a gurney, which was the wheels on a tray in which they dumped people into the crematorium. And they rolled him over to the crematoria and they pushed him in and they waited a while. And they took him out. He was still alive. They beat him again. They took him in again. He was still alive. They put him in until he was finally cooked. And I was watching this. I had a rifle, an M1 rifle. I had an M45 on my hip. I thought if I tried to stop this, they're going to turn on me. And so I let it ride. I had something similar in France when the French population would grab a girl who had been fraternizing with the Germans and they cut her hair off in the public square and spit on her. This was after France was liberated. And I was with the liberating forces. I fired my rifle into the air. I said, she's under arrest. They took her out of the chair where they tied her down. And I drove her off. I said, she's going to stand trial. I drove her off. And when we got out of sight, I said, they're going home. And, I was able to stop it. But watching it in action, the man who was in their eyes, can you hear me? All this noise.
Yeah, we hear you. We hear you. But let me ask you this. Let me ask this question to pick things up. Even though this Nazi had obviously committed heinous acts, I think, did it weigh on you seeing what the revenge was like, putting him into that oven?
I recognize that vengeance begets more vengeance. And it's not a way to deal with the problem. You try to deter future commission of such crimes. But to just go and kill every German is what the Russians planned to do and did. They said, we don't need any trials. We know what they did, and they did was horrible enough. They machine gunned hundreds of thousands of Russian prisoners of war. Which, of course, is a war crime in itself. And so I could understand the feeling for revenge, but my reason told me it doesn't work, that you can't, usually it's the guilty people who escape, and it's the lesser people who get put on trial or get killed in a vengeful response. Revenge has no time to discriminate. It kills innocent people along with the guilty. And so I said in my opening statement, vengeance is not our goal. That was the opening sentence. Nor do we seek merely a just retribution. The case we present is a plea of humanity to law. And that has been my guide ever since.
That was your opening line at Nuremberg. Karmela has a question for you, Ben. Karmela, the floor is yours.
I have a question. It's truly a question. Until very recent, even though I'm a survivor, and my father was gassed in Auschwitz, and my grandfather was gassed in Auschwitz, and my uncle and aunt, and I shouldn't enumerate 35 family members, I still cannot understand a number of things that I want to ask you a very innocent question here, and no agenda behind it. Why were there so many war criminals after World War II in Germany acquitted?
They were not only not acquitted, they were never tried. I will give you a specific answer. In my Einsatzgruppen trial, I capture the records of the Einsatzgruppen, and that the name Einsatz is nondescript name. It's action groups. They wanted to keep it quiet, but they kept the records in the camp, and they had forwarded them to Berlin, and so Berlin disseminated 99 copies of their reports. So they were very well informed what was going on. And I was limited to 24 defendants. We had 3,000 members of the Einsatzgruppen, each one of which was a mass murderer beyond any doubt, because I had their reports, 3,000. And I had to select 24 because there were only 24 seats in the trial against Goering and company, a sort of ridiculous reason. But if we had tried to do the whole 3,000, I'd still be sitting in Nuremberg prosecuting. So it was a matter of practicality, of trying to pick out, as I did, the highest ranking and the best educated defendants. And people will be surprised. I had several PhDs, doctor and doctors, double doctor. I never heard of double doctor before. Dr. Rush. He killed 32,327 Jews, I think, on September 1941. And so, to answer your question, the numbers were so great that in order to do justice to it, you'd have to, under American principles, you first accuse him of the crime, and is it a crime that what he did? And then if you find him guilty, what is the sentence for him? I went through that procedure in my head. It was clear to me that you cannot do justice in the case. The scales of justice have to be balanced. I had 1 million people, hundreds of thousands of children murdered, and I had 24 defendants. That scale can never be balanced. All I do was get a sampling and hope that we would deter others from doing the same thing. So, in order in the category of vengeance, there are limits to what we could do. We picked according to the number of seats in the court. That's no way to do justice. And justice was not done. And many of the murderers, and I call them murderers deliberately because they were murderers, were never put on trial. They went home, they went to work. Is that justice? No. What else could we do? I had 3,000 men who every day were murdering Jews and others, gypsies and cripples and people who they considered opponents. Either you go and machine gun them all, as the Russians would have done and did, or you try to give them all a fair trial, and then you sentence them accordingly, which is the American approach, as it was, and which I approved of. So it was at best only a sampling, and I'm sorry we couldn't do more.
So that's amazing. So if there was theoretically a stadium and a lot of prosecutors, in theory, a lot more of these Nazi war criminals
amphitheater
would have been prosecuted, but there just wasn't the seats.
Okay, so we assume they went back to their lives and they lived happily ever after.
I don't know if they lived happily, but they lived for a long time.
For a long time. Okay, I have one more question. Okay. Why do we always say in our language, the Nazis did this, the Nazis did that? The Nazis is equivalent, in my perception, with Germans.
Yes.
Then why do we, you know what we are doing? We are also, by calling them Nazis is like a non-existent country, right? There is no Nazi land. So the Germans are not involved, right? Because the Nazis are involved. I think this is a terminology that should be changed.
I understand your point, and there is merit to it, but the choice would have been to try to put on trial everybody who was responsible for criminal behavior. There were thousands, millions of Germans who were involved. Being a member of the Nazi Party, that's when you call them Nazis or Nazi sympathizers, and it's okay. The German public was sympathetic to the Nazi Party, and many of them joined the party, and many of them joined in the killing. It doesn't mean that the others approved or disapproved. To disapprove and disagree with the Nazis could be fatal. You were not if you were Jewish, you couldn't walk the streets. You had to walk in the sidewalk when the Nazi came to go by. You couldn't hold a job. You were thrown out of the schools. Einstein had to flee for the country, and people like that. So it's difficult to distinguish between the more or less innocent people who supported the Nazi Party, which was very widespread, and those who joined the party. And it's used the term Nazis indiscriminately. Many of the Germans were opposed. I can even including among the defendants.
Many.
Well, yeah, I don't know many. How much is many? The Nazis had the majority, and everybody, many people were afraid to say anything, because if you said something against the Nazi, you were the next one online. And they killed anybody they thought would be impossible.
So Ben, as a young Jewish man prosecuting at the Nuremberg Trials, 27 years old, was it tough to remain impartial knowing that you were Jewish?
It was not tough to remain impartial in the conduct of the trial. I was partial, even if I had not been Jewish, or that they killed many who were not Jewish. I was determined to try to do justice in the case, but there was not a trace of vengeance in my heart or in my action. I was very careful in selecting not only the defendants, but the prosecution staff, and going into the concentration camps. I made no distinction between one inmate and another, with Jewish or non-Jewish. And that was my actual sentiment. I realized that the non-Jew who was murdered was entitled to justice the same as the Jew who was murdered. And so it did not play a key role in the prosecution itself.
Ben, the Nuremberg Trials to this day it's the largest mass murder trial in the history of the world. It was also amazingly your first trial, but how in the world does one begin to prepare for that in terms of a legal strategy?
Well, it may sound boastful or whatever. I was the most experienced man in the world in that. First of all, my career was crime prevention. And it was on that basis, I suppose, that the Harvard Law School gave me a full scholarship. I was raised as an immigrant in poverty. when I got into the concentration camps, I saw what was happening. My sympathies were not which ones are Jewish and which ones are not Jewish. They were all victims. And it played no part whatsoever. I didn't ask. The Jews were supposed to wear a Star of David. Most of them, the star had been torn off, had been worn off, and you couldn't tell the difference. But I didn't try to tell the difference. And in the trial itself, I was the only Jewish prosecutor. We had 4 people to prosecute Einsatzgruppe A, B, C, and D, because we had each defendant had to cover a different territory, which was occupied by the Nazis. And I wanted to not give the impression that the Jews would take it over the trial. And so I appointed the other 3 were non-Jews. I kept a few prize guys for myself. But I would say you're thinking that the prosecutor would be full of hatred and vengeance. He was Jewish, knowing that his whole family had been killed. Members of my family were killed as well. Not my immediate family, but relatives. But it did not play any role whatsoever in my personal reaction and in my behavior.
But the Nazis' sort of obsessive-compulsive record keeping, that helped you. Tell me about how you got to those records and what tally you came to. I know you tallied up some numbers. Explain that.
My assignment from the Pentagon was to the Army to set up war crimes trials. The general who was in the Army, U.S. Army, asked me, what's a war crime? He had no idea. They knew about conduct unbecoming a gentleman. They knew about rape. But war crimes, they didn't know what that was about. So I think I was the first man in the U.S. Army to deal with that question. And I had read everything there was to read on the subject. And I knew what the law was being developed on that subject. And I don't remember the rest of your question.
Well, you told me when I interviewed you previously, I don't think it was a calculator, but it was you tallied up numbers.
Well, the way I organized that is, first thing, I needed translators and researchers. So I hired about 50 Americans who were former German refugees or whatever. They knew German. I knew the defendants, suspects who were in the Nuremberg jail, and had some pretty good idea of they were SS murderers. They were industrialists who worked people to death. They were doctors who performed medical experiments. I divided my researchers into different subjects, sent them into all the German archives, and the Germans were very good archive keepers. They got the reports of the Einsatzgruppen, as they were called. That means action groups only. And they forwarded them to Berlin. Berlin, they were assembled, put into sort of a booklet, and that was disseminated to 99 different agencies in the Nazi hierarchy. And I had the list of the distributors as well. So I would say our records were excellent. They were the original documents, marked Geheime Reichssache, top secret things, reproduced in Berlin by a guy assigned to that. And he was the only witness that I called to testify as to the authenticity of these reports. I didn't need witnesses. I said, a witness can make mistakes. I want their written top secret report. And I want the guy who assembled the reports from Berlin, we arrested him, and explained how these reports were put together. So that was all made clear before the trial.
So you only had one witness the entire trial, and
that's correct.
And the rest was all documented. The rest was
secret documents. Yes.
And if I remember correctly, you said you tallied, and when you got to 1 million deaths, can you explain that?
Yes. It was overwhelming, the scenes in the camp. People were dying left and right, dead around the ground, piles of bones, human beings waiting to be burned. And in the office, they had a list. They had written everybody's name, their number, his tattooed number, which they got in Auschwitz. That was the first stop. They give him a tattoo. Then they assigned him to different camps. All of that was there. It had to be assembled. When I got into a camp, which, my goal was to get in there as quickly as possible. As soon as I knew they were coming to a camp, I got into my Jeep and I headed for the area. I went there. At that time, I was rank of sergeant. I didn't have any insignia on me because I couldn't do my job with a rank of sergeant. I'd go into the camp. I would get the American commander and I'd say, I need 10 men immediately to surround the stripes through the office where the records are kept. Nobody goes in or out without my permission. They would say, yes, sir. And immediately I would occupy the office where the records were kept. There I found nicely the daily reports, which they sent to Berlin, and all the other records, the names of the people who were there, and the nationality, also the names of the guards, and the prince. Gold mine of information. With that information, I said, I don't need anything. I flew down with a sampling to Nuremberg, which was our headquarters for war crimes trials as well. I met there with the chief of counsel, who was later my law partner in New York, then General Telford Taylor. And I said, we have to put on a new trial. He said, you can't. Pentagon has already approved the budget. The lawyers have already been assigned. We already have 12 trials going. We can't put on any new trials now. I got indignant. I said, I have in my hand here 1 million murders. I had taken a little adding machine and had added up. And when I got to 1 million, I stopped adding. I took a sample and I flew down to Nuremberg and I said, you've got to put these guys on trial. And he said, well, can you do it in addition to your other investigative responsibilities? And I said, sure. He said, oh, you do it. And that's how it came about. That at the age of 27, I had graduated already from Harvard and passed the bar. I was appointed as the chief prosecutor in the biggest murder trial in human history. It was my first case. I had never been in a court before. So it came about. And of course, I was an A student in criminology. I knew that what I had, the documentary proof, is better than any witness testimony. And so it was. And I was able then in 2 days to just call the witness, are you so-and-so? Did you admit you killed so many thousand people? Get their lies and attempted evasion. But nobody believed it because I had such overwhelming proof.
Later on in life, okay? Let's say 10 years after all this passed, did you ever think, how was I the chosen one to carry this? Did you ever think of that? Did you reflect on that? No, I meant by maybe it's an old-fashioned term. Maybe by destiny. By destiny.
Maybe. I was talking to my wife, to whom I was happily wed for 75 years. She died about a year ago. Her picture is here on my desk. We were very happily. We never had an argument, but she was also working with me in Germany. We married in New York, and she came with me to Germany. And when she saw all the battles that I had gone through and survived, that's why the Army gave me 5 battle stars for having survived. She said, in line with your question, I think, she said, somebody up there has been saving you for a purpose. And I said, dear God, can you send me a helper?
Can you send me what?
A helper.
A helper.
Oh, helper. Right.
So, Ben, back to, so you present your case and you rest after only 2 days. And then tell me, what was it like when the convictions were handed down by the judge? What did they say? You kind of played that back for us.
The convictions lasted 2 days. The first day was the judge's written opinion. The opinion recited the evidence that I had introduced. in the trial in chief against the defendants. I would call the defendants, you're the defendant, you signed this document, is this truth, and so on. They'd wiggle a little bit. No, I was at my grandmother's funeral. I had done a very thorough investigative job before that, before he got to trial. And I had sent my investigators with instructions. You go to the man's house, you be on the roof, and you stop when you've dug up the cellar. Bring me every paper that can be relevant to this trial. And they did. And so their lies didn't cut any ice with me. And I didn't, when they started with their lies, I hit them with one of their own documents, you know. So the trial thing, and one day the next day was left for the sentencing. It was a grim scene. Courtroom was filled. Nobody said a word. Defendants would be brought into the courtroom on a little lift, an elevator which came from the prison below and came up into the courtroom, a small door. The door would open, and the prisoner, one at a time, would step forward, put on the earphones, just as you have them here, and they would hear the judge say, for the crimes of which you have been convicted, this tribunal sentences you to death by hanging. They would take the earphones off, step back, step into the lift, drop down. Next, death by hanging, death by hanging, death by hanging, death by hanging. Silence in the courtroom. No applause, no whisper, nothing. My head was just pounding, death by hanging, death by hanging, death by hanging. It was grim, is what I can say. There was no jubilation. There was no hooray, justice is being done. Nothing of the kind. It was silence, dead silence. So I can use the term dead under these things. The day before, the judges had explained what they had done in each town. I had the records of the town. So it wasn't too difficult to write the basis for the trial. It was mass murder, no matter how you cut it. When it was over, it was customary for the chief prosecutor to invite his staff to a party at his home to celebrate the ending of the trial. And not celebrating, but the ending of the trial. I couldn't go to my own party. I went home, went to bed. It was a grim experience. What else can I tell you? There was no joy in it at all.
Did the defendants know that you were Jewish?
I didn't ask them, and I would guess they guessed. I didn't conceal it. I didn't make a point of it. I didn't say you killed my people and so on. None of that.
No.
But Ben, you did something kind of amazing that I would never have done because I don't have the same heart as you. But after Otto Ohlendorf, who's sort of the lead defendant, for lack of a better term, after he was convicted and he went down the elevator, you said that you went and sought him out. What did you say to him?
A very good question because it answers a lot of questions. Ohlendorf was a general in the SS, brigadier general in the SS. He was a fairly young man, was the father of 5 children. He had given testimony in the International Military Tribunal trial, which indicated some acknowledgement that the crimes had occurred. I was a little bit sorry for him and for his children because he answered the questions. He said what we did was in self-defense. Hitler knew the Russians were going to attack us, and therefore we were justified in preempting that, striking first. And that's the argument he had made at the trial. And I thought, well, he's a human being, educated, doctor title. I want to talk to him. I had never talked to him, not a word with any of the defendants before trial. He said, I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to hear what fine gentlemen they were. Nothing. I want them to answer to these charges. I have this proof. What do you got to say? And so I was very crisp and determined. And but the trial was over. 13 of them had been sentenced to death. I figured Ohlendorf was sure going to hang. And so I went down in the lift to the prison below. He was in a guarded cage with an open little window. And I said to him in German, kann ich für Sie etwas tun? Can I do something for you, Mr. Ohlendorf? I thought he would say, tell my family I loved them, tell them I'm sorry. He would say something. I didn't know what he would say, but I felt I had never had a word to say to him during all the trial. I assigned each defendant for one of my other. I had 3 other lawyers, but I didn't steal the glory for myself. I gave them all A, B, C, and D. And I had never spoken to Ohlendorf before. And I just asked him, can I do something for you? Knowing that he would hang for sure. And he knew it and I knew it. And he said, you'll see I was right. And how do you make that out? He said, well, Hitler knew that the Russians planned to attack. I couldn't check on Hitler's view. He had more information than I had. And so I would be justified in preempting that and hitting the Russians before they hit us. And that's what I was doing. And I would do it again. And if I had my sister, the judge asked him this question, what would you do if your sister were among you? He said, I would do the same to protect my sister. So there was no remorse whatsoever. It became doubly interesting to me a couple of years from now when President Trump made his first visit to the United Nations. I saw it on TV. And he said, South Korea. He said to the North Koreans, I warn you, if you attack us, Americans, or any of our allies, we will totally destroy you. I said to myself, Mr. President, that's the Ohlendorf argument. That you're assuming they're going to attack you, therefore you could totally destroy you. How do you totally destroy a people? Do you take them all out and shoot them, as the Germans did? Do you drop a nuclear bomb on them? How do you destroy a people? And so that was the Ohlendorf defense. Ohlendorf was hanged. I was invited to attend the hanging of all the people who were hanged. Only 4 of them were hanged together. And I declined the invitation. They sent me the tape. I had the tape and I sent it to the Holocaust Museum in Washington. The ceremony was quiet. Everything was quiet in the courtroom. And I have asked myself, was Ohlendorf right? Was it self-defense against things? That wouldn't have stood up in my court in any case because self-defense had to be limited and it had to be right before the attack was launched and so on. It was an excuse. He probably believed it. And I believe many of the other defendants with doctor degrees also had a similar defense. They said so at the trial. The judges said, no way, no way. You think your neighbor is going to shoot you, can't go across the street and kill him, his wife, his grandmother, and the whole of the neighborhood. What kind of a world would we have if we had that as a rule of law? They say we would have total chaos. And so they were sentenced to death, and they were in fact executed.
Vis-a-vis your Trump example just now, do you worry that history will repeat itself, or are you confident that the rule of law will prevail?
Well, I'm, of course, hoping that law will prevail. That has been the goal of my life, to create a more humane world protected by law. And It certainly has had some effect. Whether it will eliminate all wars, it certainly has not. Whether it will eliminate all war crimes, it certainly has not. War crimes are committed by all nations in war, including this nation, the United States. And that's the nature of warfare. You get carried away, they're trying to kill you, you want to kill them first. And my own conclusion was you have to eliminate war-making itself. And the only way you can do that is to know what causes war. And so I spent a lot of time studying that question. I wrote books on all these topics, two books on defining international aggression, 2 books on creating an international criminal law, 2 volumes on enforcing international law, another book on less than slaves, on the use of slave labor. So I've studied the topic in great detail because I wanted to know the answer to your question. And it's not easy because the rule that's followed is that the leader who wants to get the mob behind him just has to tell them they're in danger, that somebody's going to attack them. And what they're trying to protect is first their religion, next their nationality, the next their economic circumstance. And these are the reasons they are given by their leaders to go to war and to give their lives if necessary for their country and to be proud. I regret to have only one life to give for my country, said Nathan Hale, hailed as a hero. I think it's a stupid thing to say. Give your life for your country, give your death for your country. You should give your life to help the country and not to be proud of you only have one life to give for a country. So we're living in... Oh, go ahead.
Excuse me. We always hear the term proportionality when there is a conflict. One of the modern terms, I don't know even if it's modern or it exists historically in military terms, but it says always proportionality. Proportionality. It has to be, the defender has to act in proportion with and not overdo it. Now, what the Germans did during World War II, they sent advance teams and murdered all the Jewish civilians. 40% of the 6 million were murdered, not in concentration camps, but in places like, you're familiar with Babi Yar, right? Babi Yar. 34,000 were shot in one day. So they did this as the armies advanced towards Russia, went into Poland. They would first go and round up well organized, according to their compulsive lists, all the Jews, and would literally bring them to ravines or next to the wall of a factory and kill them all. Okay? 1 million at least were murdered like this. 1 million at least. Okay? That is Germany.
It's not Germany. They were not killed by Germany. They were killed by people.
And who were the people?
People were German nationals mostly. And fighting.
As they say in your profession, I rest my case.
Well, I rested my case by saying the defendants in the dock wrote the darkest page of human history. Life was their toy, and death was their tool. If these men be immune, then war has lost its meaning, and we must all live in fear. That was how I ended the case in my closing statement. So what you say is, unfortunately true. You can't blame a whole people. There's an interesting...
No, I leave out a lot of people. Even though in all of Europe, less than 1% of people, try to save Jews.
Of course.
Pardon me?
Of course. Of course.
Ben, my mother should have become a prosecutor. I think she would have been excellent.
If I would have become, I wouldn't have been as nice as you. I tell you right now.
Ben, this is our second episode in a row. Carmela's emotions are running raw because last episode we spoke to the grandson of a Nazi, and she was not thrilled with him. Let's put that.
No. I wasn't. It's not accurate. Forget about that story. Let's focus on.
Let's end this.
Listen. Let's be conscious and let's be aware that we have, in Hebrew they say ish gadol. You know what an ish gadol is?
Oh.
A great man. And you must accept the title.
In one language.
In Hebrew, it's ish gadol.
Okay.
Hebrew with the Hungarian accent.
With the Hungarian accent.
Okay.
Köszönöm.
She's saying that you're a great man. Let's
you
end this.
are a great
Hold on. I want to
man.
end this on a high note. Ben, how do I live to 102?
Marry a very understanding, lovable wife to begin with.
And I think I was telling you the story. You said that you and your wife never raised your voices to one another.
Don't say anything.
Never. We never had a quarrel.
I don't care.
And
we never had. She was a Hungarian girl too.
Yeah, Hungarian girls are dangerous.
Ben,
what is the name of the town where you were born?
I was born in Schultz.
And I was born in Subotica, Sabatka.
Okay.
Ben, how many languages do you speak?
All those that are necessary.
You speak English, German,
French.
French. Very nice. And I understand, I was a little jealous. I saw the other station, she did a push-up contest with you. How many push-ups can you do these days?
Well, these days it's different. I used to do routinely 100 push-ups, among other exercises in the morning. And when my system began to fight against that, the doctor said, no more push-ups. So I said, no more push-ups. I must confess, I only did 10 this morning.
Good for you. Good for you.
Ben, listen, you're a real inspiration. You're a legend.
And may you get the
Congressional Gold Medal.
The Congressional Gold Medal is...
That's a big honor coming from the United States. Let me tell you a story about the Germans wanting to give me a medal. One day I got a call after the trials, long after the trials, and German Foreign Ministry, they said they want to give me their Medal of Honor. And would I accept it? I said, well, I'll call you back in about a week. So I convened a number of survivor groups, 98% Jewish. And I said, the Germans want to give me their Verdienstkreuz Erste Klasse, that Order of Merit First Class. Should I accept it? Well, almost all of them said, are you crazy? They're using you as a patsy. They're going to try to give you a medal and say how fine the Germans were. And they're going to say everything was fine and dandy, and you're using you by giving you the medal. And I went around the room, and about 10 people had an opinion, and that was the opinion of most of them. I said, I'm going to accept it, and I'll tell you why. Chancellor Adenauer, head of state, had made a speech in which he said terrible crimes have been committed against the Jewish people, and we owe them a debt of compensation. And based upon the public statement of the head of the German government, a conference was convened of the leading Jewish organizations, called the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany. I was counsel to the conference. And we discussed it. And there was some who said, what? You're going to go sit down with the people who murdered my mother? Are you crazy? We'll kill you too. And they threatened to kill us, and they did try to kill us. And they had some success. including one of their leaders of what we call the rogue gang, became the prime minister of Israel. Anyway, I thought about it, and I thought, this is the only chance that the German young people will have to say they're sorry. And all the years I worked in Germany, building up the restitution programs and other things, no one ever came up to me and said, I'm sorry for what we did to the Jews. And I felt that. But I said, this is another generation, and we shouldn't blame them for the crimes of their father or grandfathers. I'm going to accept the award. And I did. And I never wore it, except for a meeting with a German minister. But it was a hard decision. Where do you draw the line? How do you draw the line? Do you say, well, all Germans are murderers, all Nazis, all Germans are Nazi sympathizers anyways? Even to the next generation, that would not be fair. And my 4 children were born in Germany, in the American Army Hospital. My wife was from Hungary, as you noted. And it was a very happy marriage. I have a picture of her here. I was with her when she died. So it's hard to apportion guilt. People they're not all heroes to stand up to the government. And you see it in all governments still today, including our own.
Ben, the only thing that makes me question your intelligence is you told me you wanted to have 12 children. So that, but other than that, I know you're a brilliant man, and thank you for your service in the military. Thank you for your service as a prosecutor, and your helper, Carlotta, thank her, and she's yelling at me you have to go eat and take a nap. So we're going to...
And I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and until 120, okay? We'll have another I'm 82.
That's pretty close. How about the 240?
You know what? You know what you created? You created a situation. I'm always the old lady because we did this about 40 times already, and I'm always the old lady. Today I'm the young woman, and you are the old man.
Correct. You look fine. So keep on.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Thanks a million. Köszönöm szépen.
Köszönöm.
Thank you. Bye, Carlotta.
Bye, Carlotta.
Be right back with the news schmooze.
Welcome back. It's time for the news schmooze.
I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way. There's shame on them. You know why?
And we are back with the news schmooze. Carm, you're in the mid-sentence as usual. What was your train of thought?
The train of thought is that you gave a big lecture that they have to listen to this man because he's history. No, people are so dumb that they don't have to listen to it.
What did you think of Ben? Whenever Carmela says nothing, it's one of the most disconcerting, discombobulating, disorienting feelings that I can ever have, because I know something is brewing in her mind and it is negative. She is...
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Why would
Carmela,
it be?
I know what it is, and we can talk about it openly. You're a little cynical about the law. That's what your issue is with him. Because if you were prosecuting, you would have taken a machine gun and killed these Nazis. And I would have done the same thing. I would have done the same thing.
I was thinking
I would have not have put them on trial. I would have shot them in the head. But this man lives by a different...
No. Word of honor. I am thinking, you know who is like that? A little Rita. They are pure souls. They don't have an evil thought in their mind. They cannot think of people not being
Just admit it. You would not have been able to prosecute Nazis. You would have not been able to...
Let me tell you a story.
You would not have been able to abide by the rule of law. You would have taken a gun and killed them.
Let me tell you a story. In Israel, 1 year there was an intifada. It means the Arabs were revolting. The terrorists were blowing up buses with 100 live people in it, and they were doing major atrocities, okay, in the streets of Tel Aviv.
By the way, the air conditioning finally came on. I was ready to pass out. Go on.
So at that very time, the person, the super in our building, his name is Sammy, where we lived at that time. They stayed at this apartment in Tel Aviv. And I complained to him a few days before that the pigeons come and they make right on us because there is no screen on the window on the ninth floor.
Good luck. You always told me that was good luck.
Well, wait a second. 1 little BM on you is good luck, but 10 BMs is already bad luck. So this Sammy came up, and in the typical Israeli style, he jumped up on the rail of the terrace to put on a screen, and he was swaying on the ninth floor. And I was furious at these Arabs who blew up the mic. Who blew up the bus. But instinctively, I went and grabbed his legs around the knees to protect, like...
Oh, so he was an Arab, this guy.
He was an Arab. Sammy was an Arab. And he's a human being. I didn't feel that way.
Right.
I didn't feel that way. I felt that you know what he is? Like they say, Eshet Hayal, maybe he's a righteous man. He's a very holy, righteous man, not made for this world.
How come you didn't
because this world is much tougher than he is.
How come you didn't do the same for my turtles in Israel? Two of my turtles fell out the window. Two of my turtles fell out the window in Israel.
This is like so regressed. It's really
how is this regressed? I'm reliving a memory of childhood. I had 2 turtles that fell out the 9-story window.
It's irrelevant to our conversation.
Let's get into the news schmooze, Carm. You've got a little bitterness.
Maybe you should leave the... We have to discuss this. The news schmooze leads nowhere, and it's very anticlimactic to what happens.
Half of American evangelicals say that my religion is the one true faith leading to eternal life in heaven, and that members of other religions, even if they believe in God like Jews, are not included. This is according to the results of a new Pew Research Center survey of nearly 6,500 U.S. adults. The survey was taken between September 20th and 26th on such and such panel. In general, the survey found that the majority of Americans believe in heaven, 73%, but are conflicted about who can go there to heaven. Are you worried that this percentage of people, which I can't find now, I just said it, believe in heaven but don't believe that we as Jews can go there?
You didn't know this?
These are the evangelicals?
No, these are not the evangelicals.
Who are these?
These are like good Christians.
Does that bother you that we can't go, but they can go?
But we have a better heaven.
What is our heaven? The
Olam Haba.
On to the next story. This one is very...
We wouldn't even go to their heaven.
This is actually coming up on 60 Minutes. It caught my attention.
I'm joking. I don't give a shit about the heaven. I want to be a long time on the planet Earth.
This next story... I've been here. I went here on my honeymoon, which is why it caught my attention. Mountain gorilla tourism in Rwanda is helping the country, its people, and the animals themselves. Leslie Stahl will report on Sunday's 60 Minutes. It'll be on November 28th. Once dwindling in numbers, mountain gorillas are the only great ape whose numbers are now on the rise, attracting well-heeled tourists, I was one of them, and boosting the local economy. Leslie Stahl went to the mountains of Rwanda.
You got the points from your uncle.
I got frequent flyer points from my uncle, the only gift he's ever given me. Actually gave me a camera for my bar mitzvah. But, Carm, my dream for you is that you get to Rwanda before the end to see these animals in the wild. It's absolutely incredible.
You know, there was a genocide there.
Yes, I do.
I would feel right at home.
There's a genocide museum there. What is worse? The gas chamber or being macheted to death? I think macheted to death is definitely probably worse. Gas chamber, you go in, you kind of collapse to the floor, you're out. Machete, you could be spurting blood.
Joel, so, I have an idea.
Last question.
Went through machete right now for an hour.
Okay, between pumpkin pies, gingerbread cookies, and an extra helping of stuffing with gravy, Half of America has broken a diet because of the temptation of holiday foods and will continue and will put on a certain amount of weight. What is the weight that people will put on during the holiday season, Carmela? Not in stone, which is the British measurement, but in American pounds.
3 pounds.
8 pounds over the holiday season.
For the whole season.
Yeah, 8 pounds. Carm, we're going to be right back with 3 questions for Grandma, and we have 3 fresh questions. Right back.
It's time now for 3 questions for Grandma.
Carm, don't look at your watch until the show is over. Don't look at your watch till the show's over. We've got 3 questions for Grandma. My kids are home for Thanksgiving break, so I got 3 fresh questions. I actually have 4. I will start with this one. How do mom's boobs grow?
Well, I don't know. How do we grow in general?
Hormones, correct?
I think so.
Is that my answer for them when I go home and they ask me?
Because they don't have boobs before puberty, and the puberty, the hormones.
My daughters are going on 6 and going on 8, and their favorite thing to do now is wear what they call sports bras.
This is insane. I saw them.
It's driving me crazy.
The name is there, but it's a little T-shirt. Now go continue.
How does a needle work with a vaccine? What my kids are thinking about at the age of 6, 5, 7.
Well, the needle is very, very thin, but still it has a hole in the middle of it. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
This is how it looks if you look through it. Like it has a hole. I'm trying to explain because you don't get it. So, and then there is suction in the ampule, and then you fill it up, and then you push it into the needle, and it goes into the body.
I thought this question was actually ingenious and made me think, why are pools big and jacuzzis small? Why? Why can't you have a large jacuzzi and a small pool?
Because, my darlings, it costs a lot of money to warm it up to that temperature, and you cannot swim in it at that temperature because you're going to have a heart attack if you start to swim and jump and everything in it. And it costs money for the machines to make the waves too, the bubbles.
And a final bonus question for our audience. How do you make a rock? And I don't mean the country, I mean the stone. How do you make a rock?
It's very simple. With a 3D printer. The whole universe is made with 3D printers.
Carm, you're laughing and smiling now. You and I had, let's just say, a tense week, you and I.
Well, we didn't straighten it out because
we had a tense week. What are you whispering about?
No. I thought you would mention something about the trip here and what happened from the outside. You don't discuss that. That's privacy.
I honestly have no idea.
Somebody from the outside phone call that we had no time to argue.
Oh.
Okay.
Anyway, we're going to get off. The podcast is going to be over, and Carmela is going to tell me. I don't know. What are you going to tell me, Carmela?
I don't know.
You're going to tell me.
I love you guys. Let's liberate them and do this on our own.
Love you, America. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.